Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Joe of Sea Life Ministries, and today we are going to continue in our study in the book of Philippians. And again, I hope that you are enjoying these studies, as I know I am. Today we are going to continue in chapter 2, starting in verse 12. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good pleasure. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain or labored in vain. So now in verse 12, when Paul talks about obeyed, their faithful response to the divine commands Paul had taught them, because again, Paul's mission is to go around and spread the word of God, not to go around and make up rules that he feels are necessary or that he wants. It's always to further the gospel and build up the church. And then the next one, it's one that you may have heard of before: work out your own salvation. Now here, the Greek word rendered work out actually means to continually work to bring something to fulfillment or completion. It cannot refer to salvation by works. And then we can take a look at Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. For you have been saved through grace by faith. It is not of your own works, lest any man should boast. So it's not of our works. It's Christ's gift to us. Because if it was based on our works, then Christ dying on the cross would have been a waste of time. And we all know that that's not the case. But it does refer to the believer's responsibility for active pursuit and obedience in the process of sanctification. And then with fear and trembling, the attitude with which Christians are to pursue their sanctification meaning set apart, it involves a healthy fear of offending God and a righteous awe and respect for him. And I heard in a sermon not too long ago that it's like a reverential fear. It's almost like when you're at work, kind of putting it in a human level. You're sitting in your office at work and the boss isn't there yet. Okay, you're doing your work, but you're relaxing, you're having a good morning. You hear the boss walking down the hallway. You're thinking, oh, the boss is here. I want to really look like I'm, doing my work, and, we want him proud of you and not to get on your case for anything. That's kind of more of a human level of what Paul is talking about here. And then moving on to verse 14, it's another one I think is very relevant for today. Do all things without complaining and disputing. Now, the Greek word for complaining is a term that actually sounds like what it means. Its pronunciation is much like the muttering or grumbling in a low tone of voice. It is an emotional rejection of God's providence, will, and circumstances for one's life. And then the word for disputing is more intellectual, and here means questioning or criticisms directed negatively towards God. And then he says that you may become. Now this introduces the reason believers should have the right attitudes in pursuing godliness. Become indicates a process. We are to be growing towards something they do not yet fully possess as children of God. And we can actually reference Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1, where the Bible tells us, therefore be imitators of God as dear children. And the Christian has no greater calling or purpose than that of imitating his Lord. That is the very purpose of sanctification, growing in likeness of the Lord while serving him on earth. Continuing on, where Paul talks about being blameless and harmless. Blameless describes a life that cannot be criticized because of sin or evil. Harmless, which can also be translated innocent, describes a life that is pure, unmixed, unadulterated with sin, much like high-quality metal without any alloy. And then without fault can also be translated above reproach. In the Greek Old Testament, it is used several times of the kind of sacrifice to be brought to God, i.e., spotless and without blemish. And right there, I think I should have said, for example, not i.e., so it's kind of obvious I am reading from some of my notes, but I think that's okay. I want to be able to present the word to you as it is meant to be preached. Crooked and perverse generation. This Bible was written a couple thousand years ago, and it's still almost like a headline of a modern newspaper. Crooked is in the word form which the English scoliosis, curvature of the spinal column, comes from. It describes something that is deviated from the standard, which is true of all who stray from God's path. Perverse, it intensifies this meaning by referring to one who has strayed so far off path that his deviation is severely twisted and distorted. But that obviously does refer to, the New Testament also. In Matthew 17:17, Jesus himself said, "Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you?" And what that indicates is that the Lord was referring to the disciples and their weak faith. So just because someone has a title or has a certain following or is following someone, they can always use correction, encouragement, and anything that you can see fit in helping and forwarding the preaching of the gospel. So let's finish out this part of the chapter on verse 17. Yes, and if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. For the same reason, you also be glad and rejoice with me. Because really, an attitude of mutual joy ought to accompany any sacrificial Christian service. And then when Paul talks about being poured out, in the Greek, that really means to be offered as a libation or drink offering, which this refers to the topping off of an ancient animal sacrifice. The offer poured wine either in front of or on top of the burning animal, and the wine would be vaporized. And so that's where we will pick up next week. Time is up for today. Until then, have a great day, and Lord bless you. Bye-bye.